Now, Ian. Thank you, baby. Now, Ian.
Hey Fred, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Looking great. It's great to hear you back on fire.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
some great things
Great being
actually.
back on fire. Sputtered long enough.
Yeah. I was out to dinner last night with a friend, and she told me that the birth certificate wasn't signed until 7 days after, because her mum couldn't figure out the name. So we had a really interesting conversation of the birth of the body and
Yes.
then the birth of the name.
Yeah, right.
Then we talked about when is the birth of the recognition that she was that person. So there's like 3 births that have to happen. It was really, really interesting of how she responded to she wasn't anyone for 7 days. She wasn't even the person after the 7 days. And then suddenly there was this grokking that Glenda talks about, of this grokking of a realization of knowledge that it can't be anything else. This name that I'm hearing, I've named everything, my hand, my finger, my nose, my eyes, and suddenly you name yourself. Oh, it must be me.
Oh,
That
there's a me
self-realization.
here.
Yeah, it's a me. And in me comes other, like separate, in
Yes,
that moment of separation. It was really, really interesting because
built in.
the sense
Me,
of me,
two
yeah.
parts the same.
And it dawned on me that the sense of me at that moment is the recognition of the name into language. So into recognize, like in the opposite of your book of knowing, in the book of unknowing, is knowing that I'm now an Ian, and that grokking puts it into a language that can now be communicated with all the other things that I knew. So you entered this world of named things, not the real thing, the named things. And it's
Yeah.
really quite powerful to see that, because then we go on to, well, if it's all language and all thought is in words, who's listening and who's talking? Or are you both? And then it gets a little bit, like, experience gets a bit, what if you can have thoughts without words? And stillness comes. There's that great stillness that people were pointing to earlier.
Yeah.
And that comes because if you can think without words, then without languaging, so like in the book of unknowing, there isn't anything.
Yeah.
That's the great vast nothingness. And there needs to be words to put back into it to give this dual reflection, like you beautifully put it earlier, the reflection of something in the water, whether it's the ripples or the reflection of yourself. But once our attention gets focused onto the ripples on the water or the waves or the splashing, we don't see the water anymore. And yet it's all water as ripples and waves. And that was really, really interesting to see. And then I listened to Hannah singing. And I think sometimes I've been sharing a lot about this work in lots of areas, working with Glenda, particularly with the new book club, and focusing more attention on certain phrases, which is why I think the book club is going to be so amazing, because we focus our attention on some of your great words that are clear pointings. But looking at language, in speaking it, what I've seen is that in satsang, I'm sitting, listening, looking for the answers, listening through conditioned thinking, trying to hear something that I think I'm looking for. And yet when I start speaking, there aren't so barriers to me speaking and sharing with others. Stuff comes, I know from not where it comes, but you just can't help sharing. And I'm discovering that there's as much in sharing, in speaking. So like breathing,
Oh, absolutely.
you can't breathe in more than you breathe out. There's a balance. So in speaking and listening, there's a balance. There's a speaker and a listener. But in the satsang and trying to find something, we spend 90% of the time in listening. And I think it's a great recommendation to start reading your work out loud from the books or sharing it with other people. And what comes forward is very, very different to what you're listening to, because it comes from an unprotected, unconditioned place, because you're not looking to find something.